the West Coast, the East Coast, and deep in the heart of Texas. It's the Geek at Arms podcast with Brian, Mike, and James.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the newest episode of the Geek at Arms podcast, a podcast camped squarely at the crossroads of geek culture and Christian faith. I'm James, and as always, my buds Mike and Brian are with me. Mike, how are you today, my friend?
I am doing well. How are you, James?
Oh, very tired. It feels like I'm always starting out by saying how tired I am, which either I have too much going on in my life, I'm not getting it. Oh, no, wait, I have children. Never mind. Moving on. Brian, how are you?
I am fantastic.
Awesome.
Ooh.
We'll get into why during my Geek Out.
Very good.
Save it for that.
Well, then let's jump into Geek Out.
Okay, and since we're all so excited to hear what Brian is excited about, I'll go first.
Let's skip our usual tradition of reporting what maladies are happening to us at the moment, and let's get to the good stuff.
Well, I subluxated my pancreas, and I seem to have had an inversion of my cardiac sac, and I don't know how that flips upside down, but is it taken...
Okay, no, we're done. No, like...
I feel like we've just heard an audio clip from Geek at Arms episode 385.
Yeah. Speaking of 5, though, Geek at Arms turned 5 recently. Hooray!
Yep.
What a segue.
Yeah. All right. So, first thing that's up on my Geek Out is bookbinding, because a friend of mine and I have just kind of gotten a small group together, and we have been making a book from, I don't want to say from scratch, because it's not exactly like we, hewed down the tree and mashed the pulp ourselves, but starting from paper and cardboard and glue and stitching, we're making, at least for me, it's going to be a blank journal, but he's actually high quality printed a book that he had access to through public domain and did all of the copy editing himself. And then we're making books, and that is a fascinating and long process. Because what we've already done is made our signatures by taking 4 sheets of paper, folding them in half, and then stitching those groups of 4 pages together. And it's 8 once you do the folding, and then I've got something to the effect of 8 of those 8. So it's not a long journal, but we've stitched them together and then glued the backing, and then just generally gotten the pages cut and square, and we've just started to put the top tabs on. You know those little embroidered things that you see on the book to be kind of reinforcement when you pull them off of the shelf?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I spent 2.5 hours getting that woven together. And when I say woven together, I mean trying to do the embroidery on that to the point where I said, this is no longer fun. I am cutting this with a pair of scissors, and I am going to do one of those pre-made ones and just glue it on.
I have an idea of the level of detail and work it takes to do this. I've seen other people do bookbinding in SCA A&S events. It looks like a laborious process with several steps, but you look at it and it's fascinating, because what they're doing now, what they've done and what you're doing now really does harken back to how they've done it for hundreds of years.
It really is tapping into these old ways of making books. Some of the things that we're doing is a little bit different than how they would have done it in the medieval or early modern era.
But you're not using horse glue straight from the horse.
Well, you make a lot of assumptions there, James.
Are you not making your books the way the Vikings did?
I don't know enough about Viking bookmaking.
I was
no, Brian. Viking books are books that they've stolen from English monasteries.
I was referring back to our How to Train Your Dragon discussion.
Oh my gosh, you're right. How did they make that book? Anyway, no. Well, I'll rewatch the film. That's fine. It is a laborious process, but the fact that you're kind of sitting and doing it in community kind of makes it a different process. Granted, it also makes it really slow since you need 24 hours for the glue to dry on some of these steps. So it's like, okay, so we've applied this layer of glue, we've gone ahead and put this on, and now we need to wait 24 hours. Let's pull out our calendars. All right, when's the next time that everybody's available? Like 3 weeks.
It'll be dry by then.
Seems weirdly familiar when you have a task where you need to set aside 3 to 4 hours, and then you have 4 to 5 adults that need to find coalescing schedule. Yeah, this is.
We don't know anything about what that's like.
No, we don't. But hey, I mean, good news. I've never lost any audio from making bookbinding. I mean, that's.
So you weren't inhaling the horse glue. That's good.
Again, you make a lot of assumptions there, James. The next thing I've got on my Geek Out is Avatar Legends, which is the new, kind of still in production RPG from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I've got the early preview releases of the PDFs, and this thing is looking really interesting.
Yeah, I haven't had the time to read through it yet, but I've got those same PDFs.
Yeah,
I remember it was like blowing up in all the various geek communities when the Kickstarter started. And I looked at it, oh, that looks so cool. I don't have the money for this.
Yeah, it was the question of when we were looking at, okay, what are the finances looking like? What budget does this come out of? And my wife and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, are we going halves out of our own personal expenditures? Is this going to be a me expenditure, or is this entertainment? She's like, this is entertainment budget. It's like, back it. I'm like, okay, guess we're backing it. And it's fascinating. I haven't played it yet. Derek, the Geek Preacher White, has played it. He had some good things to say about it. He said the combat is a little bit unclear. Reading the combat system, I think the combat is a little bit unclear. I'm going to listen to some actual plays to see if I can get an idea of the flow, because you're not operating based off of hit points. Like you don't see it represented in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where Zuko is going to come up and cast Fireball and see if we take Katara down to 0 hit points and just leave nothing but a crackling mess sitting there on the floor. Like that's not their style. So you take strain. You don't take damage, so to speak. I mean, you do get damaged, but you take fatigue and strain. And there's more that happens with I would say, the social and emotional dynamic than there does actually punching somebody with a fist of stone. I mean, you can do that. The game is definitely set up to do that, but there may be ways to put strain on your opponents that don't have anything to do with actually touching them with whatever it is that you're bending, which I thought
the consequences aren't going to be broken bones so much as they are dealing with the relationship changes as a result of the combat.
Right. A broken bone, not going to happen. A bruised ego, now that's some serious damage.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually kind of true to the show. So it's interesting. I'm looking forward to finishing reading as of the recording of this podcast, they've just released the second installment that has the adventure books. But I'm also really impressed that there's a lot of mindfulness that went into making this game. There's an entire chapter, or at least a section. No, it's not a whole chapter, but it's a section of character creation called Choosing a Name. And it starts off by saying, okay, Avatar: The Last Airbender drew from a lot of indigenous populations of North America. It also drew from Korean culture, and it drew from Japanese culture and from Chinese culture, and also drew from some of their naming conventions. When picking a name for your character, consider these tables. These tables show the character name, the the original culture of origin and the meaning within that language. And it kind of does more than just a nudge of, please don't just make up a name that sounds kind of Chinesey to you, because that can be really offensive. And I'm like, this section doesn't have Daniel Kwan's name on it, but it has Daniel Kwan's name all over it. And I think this is really, really cool.
Yeah, that was actually kind of echoing in my head. I've been playing that Lost Ark MMO, kind of an MMO. And I'm naming my character. I'm like, oh, I got this martial artist character. I need something that sounds a little Asian. Like, I just read that thing in that Avatar book. I should be careful about that.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's kind of the cool thing about making the book in this day and age, is that there's enough awareness that it makes it into the core book. That's not supplemental. That's not stuff that you're expected to figure out on your own. It's going into the cultural awareness is going into the core book. And I might have done the same thing had I not been listening to so much of Daniel Kwan and Asians Represent. And yeah, I think that I actually would not have backed the thing if I had not seen his name attached, because I was actually kind of afraid of just exactly that sort of thing. Like, you know, this has the potential to go so oh, Daniel Kwan. No, I trust what they're gonna do. So I'm gonna back this. So aside from Avatar, I have been geeking out to Mario Kart 8 because they just released some DLC in a booster pack. So just this last Friday, as of the recording of the show, they had the first installment of 48 new tracks for Mario Kart 8. So for $24, you pay once, and then they release several tracks each installment over a period of 2 years. And so the first set of 8 tracks just got released on Friday. And it took me and my family a little over 24 hours to get the gold cup in all of those in all CCs. So we've been playing more than a little of that.
I'm going to have to look into that, because Mario Kart is a game that is played almost on the daily in this house. So yeah, I think new courses would be most welcome for the kids.
You know, for kids.
For kids. That's not foreshadowing at all.
Our audience is saying, huh?
That's okay. After the end of the show, they're still going to be going, huh?
I just watched this show. I'm probably going to watch it again, and I'm still going very much, huh?
So of the new ones that have released so far, which one was your favorite?
Oh, gosh. In the new edition, what we've got is at a set of 8 tracks. One of the ones that I was really looking forward to was the Coconut Mall, because I really loved that one on the Wii. But I think that the ones that have been kind of the family favorites have been the Toad Circuit and also the Sky Garden. Toad Circuit originally appeared in Mario Kart 7, and Sky Garden originally appeared in Mario Kart Super Circuit. So they've been the ones that we really have been enjoying.
Very cool. I have enjoyed when you see courses that have been remastered for Mario Kart 8 that have shown up in past games. I don't know why I love it so much, but every time we play the Excite Bite track, I'm just happy.
That one has, every time that one comes up, my youngest and I are looking at each other like, oh, it is on, because I love this course.
Mm-hmm.
And my eldest brought one of her friends over, and he really loves Mario Kart, and so he wanted to race us. And that young man is dead now, and it's not because he creamed us, but it's definitely because he creamed us.
I don't know if admitting homicide over the podcast is a good idea, Mike.
I've got a replicant of him, and they won't notice for another 10 years. He doesn't age. But no, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, Mario Kart is pretty much how we take out aggression with each other, and sometimes on each other.
Hey, it's cheaper than therapy.
And considerably less effective. But that'll about wrap it up for me.
All right. Well, as promised, I have some news that I'm very excited about. Tomorrow, I start a new job.
Hooray!
Awesome.
I've been at the same place for almost 10 years. It's nine and some change. And I was kind of just plateauing at Muse. And so now I'm going to be what's my title now? Technical consultant for side effect software. I'm not going to be in production anymore, which is a little disappointing, not getting to work on shows. But I'll be helping all of the people who are working in production to get the best use out of the software.
Very cool.
So you're not working on any particular production. You're working on all of the productions. That's fantastic.
Yeah, kind of.
So now you can just tell these people that he's going to be at the end of the credits of a movie, and special thanks to, and there's Brian's name.
Yeah, probably not so much. But
although, I mean, seeing that you're kind of plateauing in a particular job, taking a risk and stepping out into kind of a new realm is a lot better than taking just a sprint off of a boardroom table. So that's...
Yes, that's true. And it was a really difficult decision to make because this is the very first time that I've left a job that I wasn't just sick of. You know, there's a reason that I'd stayed at Muse for 9 years. It's just a lot of wonderful people that I really enjoyed the work, but spending that much time around the same people, you don't learn, you stop learning eventually because they've already taught you everything that you're going to get from them. So new minds, new horizons. And I'm very excited about it and very scared and concerned that I won't actually be able to do the new job because they hired me to work on software that I have never really, I've used it, but only slightly.
I mean, I think that this sounds like somebody just got a new job.
Yeah.
And if you should happen to fail, you can always go back to production work.
That's true. And they've said at Muse that they're going to hold the door open for me if I decide to come back.
Oh, that is so kind.
Mm-hmm.
That, friends, is why you don't burn bridges. That's why you go out the right way and you form relationships with the people you work with.
Mm-hmm. And I would be very happy to go back there if it comes down to that. I mean, there's no problem. If I find out side effects is just not the thing for me, then I'll be very, very pleased to go back to Muse.
Well, it sounds like everybody's a class act here then.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
cool.
Definitely.
Well, dude, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. The only actual geek out, I mean, working for a software company is pretty geeky, but things that other people can relate to is I have been watching The Expanse.
That is a show.
Show has been, it has been recommended to me so many times, and it's like I watched about 75% of the first episode, and it's like, no, this isn't for me. But then Peter Martin said, no, get into the second season, give it some time, you'll like it, and he was right because it's fantastic. I think I'm in season 4 now, if I remember right. But there's one particular character that I wanted to talk about a little bit. That's the character of Amos Burton.
Oh my gosh.
For those who have seen the show, you know who I'm talking about. For those who haven't, he's a little hard to pin down at first. He seems to be a man with no conscience. Or rather, he's using other people to substitute for his conscience.
Yeah.
And he starts out and he says point blank to our main protagonist, I don't know whether I should kill you or not. The only reason I don't is because my friend tells me that, I know my friend wouldn't like it. And I've watched him go through this show, and eventually, it being a space opera, people make mistakes, and his friend disillusions him, and he's like, okay, well, she's not the emblem of virtue that I thought that she was, and I can't use her to be my conscience anymore. So he gloms onto somebody else. And eventually that person lets him down. And it's like, well, that person just leaves. And he's like, I can't follow him. Now my conscience is gone again. He grabs somebody else. And I'm watching him go from person to person. And incrementally, it's been so slow over the course of the series. He is getting better. He is starting to recognize this is the thing that I should do. This is the thing that a good person would do. I'm not going to do it, but I recognize that it's what I should do.
What's interesting is when you see him being the angel on somebody else's shoulder. I don't know that you're there yet, but there is somebody who's going to pull the trigger on somebody in revenge. And he lays his hand on that guy's gun and says, "You're not that guy.
You're not the guy." And
You're
he turns
not
around and
that
says,
guy.
I'm the guy.
I am that guy."
Wow.
I mean,
It's good stuff. Man, I
like,
was
the funny thing is, I called that line. I was watching it for the first time. It was like, "You're not that
Me
guy."
too.
And like, take your daughter and go off. And then he looks at the guy. He looks at this scumbag of a human being in a lab coat. He just looks at them kind of wild eyes, like, "I am that guy." And then you don't see what happens, but he rejoins the rest of the group. The little girl's like, "Oh, where's Dr. So-and-so?" "He's not coming." Like, okay. We all know what that means.
yeah.
They don't need to.
Well, we don't need to burden the little girl with that.
Right, right. And he recognizes that. I mean, he doesn't, he is not so depraved at that point that he says something that would be true to himself. Like, sometimes a guy needs to be killed. Like I shoot people, sweetheart. He doesn't do that. He has enough discernment and enough growth by that point to say, that's not the thing to do. It doesn't make him a good person, but
Oh no.
it makes him at least a growing person with a trajectory.
Yeah. And the last episode that I saw, somebody challenged him about the horrible thing that he'd done. And he stops and he thinks, he says, "Yeah, Jim wouldn't have done that. I need to get back to my crew." He's recognizing that without that support of, people who are pulling him up, that he's sliding back into old habits, sliding back into his old way of thinking. And the thing that has been striking me, because there's a character in, I think it's into season 2 or in season 3. I haven't been keeping track of the episode numbers. There's this Methodist pastor.
Oh yeah.
And she's an interesting character on her own, because here's this pastor who never once tells anybody about God. And she has this opportunity with Amos here. He's latched onto her. Here's my symbol of virtue. This is the person who's going to tell me what right and wrong is. And there's his opportunity for somebody to say, you don't need another person to be filling this role. You need Jesus, boy. But she didn't do that because she doesn't believe it. And I was like, that is the tragedy in the middle of this show.
Yeah. Here's my question. What would Shepherd Book have done?
That's an interesting question.
Right. I mean, highly speculative here. I think that's the difference between well-written clergy and typical TV clergy, which...
Yeah.
Whatever he would have done, it probably would have involved kneecaps.
Well, I'm definitely writing that fanfic soon.
Right?
Shepherd Book meets Amos Burton.
I've got to get around. I've only seen the first season, and that was like 5 years ago. So I know there's they just released season 6, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it capped at season 6.
Okay. So, I mean, I enjoyed it. I was kind of wondering where they were going with it. I really enjoyed the characters, and I'll watch almost anything with Shora. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I love her. Anytime I hear her voice in a video game or see her on screen, just her acting, her presence, her voice as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Then you're talking about
I'm watching.
Avasarala then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, she was a force on that show.
I really liked the way that they let her just become unhinged a few times. Because in most things that she's in, she's very controlled and she's majestic, and she's got that going on here. But then she loses it a couple of times. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I said to my to Kaja once or twice. Like, what we really need around here is for Avasarala to show up and cuss at the problem.
All right, I got to get back into the show then.
Yeah, the whole bit when she's all stressed out from space travel, and that's just it's removed her filters. It's really really entertaining.
I mean, not like do you know what? The only filter Avasarala ever had was when she was on network television, and then Prime picked her up, and then it's like, nope, say whatever you want.
Yeah, and it's been a really fun ride, that show. And this character of Amos, I'm really curious to see where he ends up at the end of it all, because it's a really slow burn on his character progression.
Yeah.
In most shows, you get an arc that goes across a season, and then the next season they've got a different issue, a different arc, and that's fine in most cases. People tend to be like that, where I'm struggling with a thing, I solve it, and then I move on to the next thing that I'm struggling with. It was always there, but it wasn't, the most important thing. But Amos, it's been the same struggle, and it's just like these little incremental, tiny steps. And the person that we see at the end, I know is not going to bear much resemblance to the person at the beginning, but you can't detect the in-betweens. It's so slow. It's really nice.
I'm not going to spoil anything. Watching him is a fascinating set of developments.
Yeah, it's a great character study.
Mm-hmm.
So James, what's been on your geek plate lately?
A lot. My plate runneth over. I have had 3 really big geeky things happen in the past few weeks. All of which, just one of them, I could spend my entire geek out talking about. But I find myself, what I really kind of want to talk about is Babylon 5.
I mean,
Can't say we blame you.
Yeah, since Brian just talked about a long-running science fiction series, we've run on. No, I've got just talk about Babylon 5.
And this is our 5th anniversary. We have to talk about Babylon 5 because it's synchronicity, right?
That's right. And as we look at our past episodes, we find years 1 through 3 of Geek at Arms disappeared. Year 4 blew up, and now we're left with year 5 of Geek at Arms. So if you're looking for our past episodes, sorry, something weird has happened. And if you begin to hear weird tachyon emissions through your headphones or the name repeated, Zathras, don't worry about it. Just look forward to our future episodes.
Okay, I need to rewatch this so I can figure out what on earth you're talking about.
So we recently got HBO streaming service because it was offered to us for free because we have AT&T for our household phone and internet, and I've never had it before, so I was looking to see what they had to offer. Found a lot of really great stuff. Found all of the DC superhero stuff, movies and cartoons. Found all of the years of Looney Tunes. Which is great. My kids and I love watching those. Found a metric ton of Godzilla movies, which I was not expecting, which just made me giddy. And something else I was not expecting was all the seasons of Babylon 5. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, awesome. Man, I haven't watched season 1 or the first episode in years. I'll just, watch episode 1 real quick, and, that'll be that. Classic mistake.
Like 18 hours later.
More like 2.5, 3 weeks later, and I'm nearly through the whole thing. I've been binging it like crazy. I've been really appreciative of how well it has held up. Effects aside, I don't care. Back in the 90s when this began, they looked great. I think they're still just fine. But the characters, the stories, really good. And something else I was thinking, I don't know if this is personal opinion. I can't remember the last time I watched a genre TV show, in this case science fiction, and the first season was as solid as it was. Usually with the first season, they're finding their footing. You give a lot of allowances. I thought it was good. I thought it was very good, better than it could have been. And I know that there were a lot of problems behind the scenes. I know a lot of changes were made going into season 2, but that didn't detract from my enjoyment or appreciation of the first season at all.
I mean,
I think about half of the first season episodes.
Fair.
It's very hit and miss for me.
See, I remember liking the first season, except that the makeup was always such a distraction for me. I don't imagine that on HD that's going to get any better. But I do have it on my docket to rewatch it because a friend of mine is very interested in Kajanai's evaluation of the show's interaction with religion.
Yeah.
And so that's on our docket to kind of, I mean, at least I have ahead to make a journal, a watching journal out of it, and just see what my thoughts are over time as the show goes on.
Fair. There are 2 episodes that I want to kind of shine a light on. As far as when I watch them, with shows like whether it's Star Trek, Babylon 5, and more, there's always going to be commentary about what has happened or what is currently happening in the world. And these 2, although they aired back in 1995, watching them in today's climate was very sobering. The first one was the episode Confessions and Lamentations, where the doctor of the station finds that there's a certain species of alien called the Marcab, who on Babylon 5, they keep dying. Now, it always seems like it's of natural causes, but one here, one there, and he's like, something doesn't add up. To make a long episode short, they all have a disease, which is killing their entire species. But because of a social and religious stigma that revolves around this disease, if someone gets it, they will not admit they have it.
Oh,
because
man.
then they will be ostracized by the others, and they will not admit that. They also won't admit it to themselves. No, I don't have this disease. I have been a good person. I have been clean. I have been pure. I have been holy. So therefore, I do not have it, and I'm just going to continue on with my normal life and be a part of the general population.
Oh my gosh, that actually is a theme of humanity and disease.
Mm-hmm.
Syphilis,
and because he won't put a mask on, I'm sorry, did I say that? No, because he just won't admit it and won't seek help, or he won't isolate himself. He won't quarantine himself. He is spreading it to all the others. And by the end of the episode, the entire species is dead.
Wow.
And that last scene in that episode haunts me.
It punches you in the gut and it leaves the fist there. It's hurt and it aches.
But it's interesting to see what they were drawing from the past that really taps into something that is pretty core to, not core, but is relatable to
what is happening in our current day. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next episode, it's called The Long Twilight Struggle. Earlier in the season, 2 of the major races, the Narn and the Centauri, start up another war. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, but the Narn are being beaten. They are making a last-ditch effort to try to stop the enemy. They're going to attack one of their supply worlds and try to buy themselves some time. Well, the Centauri find out about it. They send some of their allies, behind-the-scene allies, who are a major problem in this world. The Narn strike force is completely wiped out in seconds. And instead of continuing the campaign, the Centauri decide, we're just going to skip to the end, and they show up at the Narn homeworld and begin bombing it. Populated areas, civilian areas, all of that. And considering what I had been reading in the news recently, watching that episode was very sobering and haunting.
It's interesting how our science fiction can seem prophetic when really what it's doing is speaking wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Because as much as we can put those things on the screen and say, yeah, that's awful, certainly we've learned so much since then. Clearly we haven't. And there are some lessons that we need to hear over and over again.
Brian, you talk about last scenes, which really carry an emotional hit. In the first 2 seasons, there's a character. He's the Narn ambassador named Jakar, who is one of my favorite characters in all of science fiction. Actually, just one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. And he's talking with someone who is still on his homeworld. And the message is very shaky and staticky. And he's giving a report how there's dust in the air. It's getting colder. It's harder to see the sun. Everyone's been taking refuge in shelters and moving from one shelter to the next. And he tells them, we've got one final order for you from the government. And you see Jakar, who is this very proud, very strong man. He goes to the commander of the space station, says, I've been in talks with my government. their last order for me is to come to you and to request asylum.
And he was gung-ho to go back home. He wanted to go back and fight.
Yeah. He was ready to hop on the next ship and get back there and to help his people. And instead, he's been told, no, we need you on Babylon 5. We need allies for the future. You have to stay there.
Yeah, I need to rewatch the show.
Rewatch Babylon 5, and we'll talk about it. I'll watch the rest of The Expanse.
Like, I think that what the deal is probably going to be, I watch Babylon 5, and we talk about Babylon 5. You watch The Expanse, and we still talk about Babylon 5.
Babylon 5, yeah.
I'm not seeing the problem here.
I'm not saying I'm sad about it. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen.
I could go on a lot longer, but I'm going to keep it short about B5 anyway. I'm in the middle of season 5. Speaking about hit and miss episodes, wow. It is what it is. You know, there are some in this season which I actually thought were like diamonds in the rough. And then there's others that are, you know, we're not even going to talk about them. Just going to move on. But I've thoroughly enjoyed rewatching this series, and it's not going to be the last time I do. So it's just that it holds up so well. But moving on from B5, like I said earlier, 3 very big things have happened in the last few weeks, kind of in quick succession. The first one was that for a while I wanted to move away from the Xbox onto something else where I have more people who play online, and also something that I could play more co-op games with my wife. And we were actually able to get our hands on a PS5.
How you been liking it?
I have been enjoying it a lot. Joy and I were actually up a little later than we should have been, playing a co-op game called Divinity 2 last night. Only gotten a couple of games so far. They had a lot of games for free if you subscribe to like PS Plus, which is their version of Xbox Live online play. So I've downloaded a few games, including a Crash Bandicoot game, which I've not played Crash Bandicoot since 1998. I don't know. And I'm like, wow, this game is, you know, they updated it, updated the graphics. I'm like, this looks so beautiful. Why is this game still so freaking hard?
What type of game is it? Like, what's the...
It's like a forward, back, and side-scrolling platform game. It's just frustrating. Because if you don't time...
Hey, James, ever play Hollow Knight?
Shut up. If you know what? I'll play Hollow Knight. You try Crash Bandicoot, and we'll compare notes.
I would,
and by comparing notes, it will probably mean drinking most of a bottle of tequila.
That'll improve the platforming right there.
You will. It's a game that's a lot about timing. If you don't time a jump just right and hit it at the exact point, you're going to fall into a pit, or you're going to hit something which kills you instantly.
Yeah.
So,
gotcha.
And I'm like, why are my reflexes not the exact same that they were when I was 19 years old? But anyway, I also got a game I have been wanting ever since it came out a few years ago called Horizon Zero Dawn. It takes place in a far-flung future. I guess you could call it post-apocalyptic, but so many years have passed since the apocalypse. Nature has reclaimed the Earth, and humanity has entered into a tribal-like society. There's still animals out there. There are also giant robots that are in the shape of animals. So that makes hunting and living in the world very interesting. But it's also interesting to see humans with, you know, leather, buckskin clothing, beads, and bits of polyceramic armor sewn into their clothing, and using fiber optic cable to tie together their bridges, hold their pants up, so on and so forth.
This sounds a little bit like the New England Ren Fair.
I gotta go check out the New England Ren Fair sometime.
It's here.
But you play as the character named Alloy. She, through access to a piece of technology, is able to interact with some of the robots and with her surroundings in a unique way. It's one of the most visually appealing games I have seen in a long time. It's absolutely beautiful. Fun gameplay, great story, and I'm glad that I was able to get it for the price that I did, because it has been out for a few. And on the PS5, it's been great. My only gripe for the PS5 was that it for everything, for as powerful as it's supposed to be and as much as you pay, it doesn't come with an HDMI cable.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess that tracks.
I told Brian, he's like, well, just use one of your own HDMI cables. I'm like, yeah, Brian, because I have those just lying around. I had to remind him, I'm not you, dude.
I mean, I have a box within arm's reach that has like 4 of them in it.
I rest my case.
I mean,
Yeah.
given what I know of you, that number seems kind of low.
Well, I'm not an early adopter. I still have an awful lot of VGA cables too and DVI.
As the two cables are just kind of sitting there awkwardly next to each other, kind of side-eyeing each other like, do we have to talk to them?
Back in my day, stop it, Grandpa.
And besides, I have like 6 screens around here that all have HDMI plugged into them, so a lot of my cables are in use.
You know, sometimes though he looks at that box and thinks, maybe I should order 1 or 2 more.
I mean,
Just so I know I have enough.
actually, the fact that he has 6
Yeah,
in use, the number
sweet.
seems about right. But it's just me.
Well, I'm actually expecting a workstation from my new job, so I had to buy 2 more DisplayPort cables to connect to it. So I actually did order more monitor cables just this week.
Hands of all those that are surprised. That's what I thought.
I'm imagining a workstation that he's building with just a few more monitors so that he can get just a 360 display and he can just pivot his work chair, his office chair around. In the end, the whole thing has to be lowered around him, kind of like Darth Vader's meditation chamber. But that's just my mental picture.
Well, now he's thinking about actually doing that and making sure that, you know, air compressors fire so that you see steam coming up along to the soundtrack of dun, 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 dun.
Well, I have been thinking about getting a helmet situation with my Oculus.
I
For
actually was
helmet
having
on
some really bad ideas as to what I could do with an Oculus and my bike right now. So let's just...
I do not recommend that.
I've played
Because
that
then,
game.
Brian, have you heard from Mike recently? No, I haven't.
I actually played a
He
demo of a
thinks he-
game at PAX that did involve an exercise bike and an Oculus and also altitude control. It was pretty amazing.
Here's video of the man flying off an unfinished overpass with a headset on his bike. If you increase your audio, you can hear him screaming, "Gotta catch them all!" Although, I'll be honest, Mike, that is kind of one of the ways I pictured you going out.
I try.
Everybody will be able to see him as he goes off the edge.
I try every day to make sure that on my bike is not how I go out.
All right, well, moving on, the PlayStation 5 has been very nice. I'm still trying to connect to a lot of members of the geek community on it because I know there are some people out there who have PS4s and PS5s. And I'm hoping to do more online play. That was one reason why I left the Xbox. Most of my gamer group on there has just moved on to other things or just isn't playing at all. And for me, video gaming is also very much a social thing. And so I'm hoping to find some new people to play with. So what else? I did this little thing this last March. I finally, for the first time in my SCA career, got to go to the event called Gulf Wars.
How was it?
And I'm still recovering from it. It's a full week-long event that's held in Mississippi, and it was a good 8-hour drive from where I live in Texas. And, you know, that's not that bad. I used to make that trip from Colorado to Kansas to see family, and the view from Texas to Mississippi is much better than Colorado to Kansas. Louisiana is a very pretty state, thankfully. Like I said, the event, it's a battle between the kingdoms situated in Texas versus Florida and the other kingdoms in Louisiana and Mississippi and more, and other kingdoms come down and fight as well and join one side or the other. A lot goes on, a lot of chivalric combat, rapier, arts and science, pages upon pages of different classes being taught. A lot of bardic, a huge amount of shopping, several dozen vendors there selling their wares. And I don't know how, but I did not end up spending nearly as much as I thought I would. I honestly thought I was going to come back with another sword. Somehow I didn't. My willpower held strong, and I also had Joy with me, so that's another reason why.
I was going to ask.
You know what, though? I had my cash saved up. If I had bought one, she wouldn't have cared. There were a lot of really beautiful ones, especially swords from Darkwood Armory.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know. There was only one that when I got it in my hands, it was like, oh, I need to put this down right now or I'm going to go home with it.
Incoming message from your better judgment.
Yeah. The only reason I didn't was because it was another cut and thrust longsword. And I didn't have my cut and thrust gauntlets on, so I couldn't tell how well it would fit, like how it would feel with them on, if I'd be able to get both hands on it comfortably and be able to maneuver it properly. So I could have gone to camp, gotten them, and come back, but I walked a lot at that event, and my feet hurt. So that was probably in my favor.
Yeah, it sounds like that wasn't a deal that you just couldn't pass up.
No, it wasn't. So, I mean, it was beautiful. Would I like to have it? Yeah. But the longsword I have right now works too well, and I don't need two of them at the moment.
Until you grow another couple arms, then we'll talk. If you're ready to go out there like General Grievous, then we'd be talking.
But it was a lot of fun. I don't even know how many thousands of people were there. This is the first Gulf War they've had since 2019, I think. Both 2020 and 2021 were canceled for obvious reasons.
Right.
So a lot of people were there. We went for the first half of the week because, well, for several reasons. I was able to get some fighting in. The Rapier Resurrection Battle. And that was 4 rounds over the course of an hour and a half. And I about died at the end of it, but it was a lot of fun. It did not stink as bad as I thought I would because of all of the fighter practices that we've had to cancel because of COVID and Omicron and more, and weather. Unfortunately, that was all I was able to do because at some point, it's not if it's going to rain in Gulf War, it's when and how much. And the rain did hit enough so that they had to cancel a few, well, not cancel, but postpone some of the Rapier battles for later in the week. And unfortunately, I was going to be gone. But had a lot of fun. Saw some people I haven't seen in a while. Got to take part in a bardic circle at night. Beautiful stars were out around a nice warm fire. A lot of people singing, telling some stories. And those are some of my favorite moments at SCA events. I hope to be able to do it again in the future. And the last bit of my geek out, I'll try to get through quickly because I don't know how long I've been going for.
45 minutes. No, that was a lie.
But James will make it true just because you said it.
Just for that, Brian, I'm going for 46. Buckle up, boys. First, we're going to go back to Babylon 5.
Season 1, Episode 1. It opens on
The Gathering.
So anyway, back in March, actually just a couple of days after we got back from Gulf War, so I was completely, totally rested and fine and not sore at all from walking like 16,000 steps a day. My father and I went to the Texas Blade Show, which is like a con for people who like really sharp things. And now, every year there is a Blade Show that is usually referred to as the Blade Show, held out in Georgia. But they are expanding. There's now going to be one in, I think, California, Blade Show West, and one in Fort Worth, Texas Blade Show. There were 300 vendors and companies there with tables and booths, all exhibiting their blades and selling them. And it was a whole lot of fun.
That's a lot of sharps.
Yes, it is.
The California one's kind of lame because you can't have anything over 2 inches.
I made that joke to my dad. I'm like, you know what? I really hope they hold, if they're going to hold one out west, I hope it's somewhere than California because there's going to be some guard at the front with a toothpick saying, your knife longer than this, can't go in. I was worried when I saw that they were going to be coming to Texas about how much it was going to cost to get in because you guys know con tickets can kind of get expensive. Whatever it is you're going to see. But these were only $20 for a day pass.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, the conventions that are more geared toward vendors selling stuff to people will have lower entry tickets for people coming in to browse and higher booth costs for the vendors.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That would explain, as my dad and I were going to the parking garage afterwards, we hear some dude yelling from the back of his Jeep, y'all want to buy some knives?
If I don't, I'm in the wrong place, I'll tell you what.
we were worried that some of the bigger names in the knife world weren't going to be there. But there were, like, Microtech was there, we and Civivi, Tops, Hogue, Protech, and many more. If you were someone who was either a knife maker or someone wanting to get into it, all the supplies in the world that you needed to get started in it or to continue doing it. High quality grinders. I looked at my dad and said, so how long do you think I'd have to sleep at y'all's house if I came home with a $1,600 anvil?
Was that on offer there?
Oh, there were a lot of anvils on offer.
I don't find that surprising.
But when we got there, a lot of the blade companies will have exclusives for like a specific show, a model of knife that will look different, a different handle material, a pattern on the blade, whatever. And Microtech had some exclusives. They showed a video. As soon as they opened the doors, people were running for the Microtech booth. And like when my dad and I got in there, both he and I have Microtechs, and we're like, we should go, see what they've got. It was like a teeming mass of like 3 to 4 people deep around the booth. No line. It was like Black Friday just around that booth. I'm like, okay, I'm not going near that for a while. I did make it over to the Protech booth, and because I'm not going to go to a place like this and not buy something. I did buy a little bit more than I thought I was going to. And I was able to get my hands on a knife called the Protech Malibu. You can Google away for that, and I'll post pictures of these on Facebook later. An aluminum handle, a flipper with a modified Tanto CPM 20 CV steel blade with a push-button lock. And I've wanted it for a long time, but I didn't want to get it until I could actually get it in hand, see how it feels. And I really enjoyed it. They had a show exclusive, which had blue aluminum with a satin blade and like a mother of pearl button. It was very pretty. Just not my jam. I also ended up getting a blade called the Civivi Crit, and it's a double knife blade. One is just a standard drop point knife blade, and on the other side, you flip it out, and it's got a multi-tool. It's got a bottle opener, some areas to put in bits or as a hex wrench, a ruler on the top, a flathead screwdriver, and a seatbelt slicer. So this now becomes my car knife, because everyone should have a car knife, obviously. Bought other little doodads here and there from some of the other vendors. The only other big thing I bought was that I was needing a new bag for work. And there is a company that makes bags, whether it's backpacks or just little everyday carry bags, called VanQuest. And they had some of their messenger bags, which are hard to find online. And one thing I should also mention is that a lot of these vendors will be selling their stuff for between $20 to $40 or $50 cheaper than you can usually find it online, because that's, show cost, show prices. And also the fact that if you come to them with cash in hand, that's all they're going to charge you, no taxes. So we spent about a good 5 or 6 hours there just looking around and talking with some of the different vendors. I met a couple of people who had been contestants on the TV show Forged in Fire.
Oh, that seems neat.
Yeah, it was very cool. But one cool thing I noticed was that everyone was I don't think I encountered one rude person the entire day. Everyone in there had at least one thing in common. We liked knives. And it was so easy to strike up a conversation with literally everyone I was standing beside, whether it's about what they got or what they were in line hoping to get.
I imagine it's a lot easier to be a bit more polite when everybody's got sharp things.
This is true. So from everything I've seen online, it was a great success. I hope and I expect it will become a yearly thing. And as long as they keep the ticket prices reasonable, it's something that I hope my dad as well will be going to every year from now on. If so, I've got to start saving my money for next year now. And I think that will finally wrap up my Geek Out. I didn't mean for it to run that long, but I just decided to knock out everything that had been going on with me in one go. And that will take us to our new film club, which is going to be kind of a different film club than we've done in the past. We've always revolved around a central theme for the movies that we've been watching. And this theme isn't so much of a theme as it is here's a movie that each of us just really likes because.
It's just kind of a self-indulgent romp, really, is what it is.
We
decided we don't have a boss to tell us what to do, so we're just going to do whatever the heck we want.
That's right. So, Brian, you picked the first movie, enthusiastically so. So, you take it away, my man.
Well, this time we watched The Hudsucker Proxy, 1994 film by the Coen brothers, starring Tim Robbins. And I originally saw this film. I used to work in a Blockbuster, and you get 7 free rentals a week. And so eventually you run out of the obvious movies to watch. And this one is, I've been seeing it on the shelf, and it's just got Tim Robbins on the cover, like this extreme low angle with this hoop in his hands, looking crazy. I'm like, the Hudsucker Proxy. What on earth is that?
Yeah, this did not go through the marketing team before they did the design on that.
No. It did, Mike, except even after having watched it several times, they still didn't know what to do with it.
I mean, you're probably not wrong.
So I guess the first question we need to ask, and this was one that my wife asked me after we got done watching it, why did Brian pick this?
Oh, I would have expected her to understand at least.
Before I saw the film, I have to say this, is that I had done just a quick look as to what the premise was, like 1958 corporate America film done in the 1990s. Is this going to be kind of like a retro The Firm or some Tom Clancy novel? No, I mean, like, yeah. Brian has good taste in movies, so I don't know what's happening here. That. But okay, I would like enjoyed.
I've got a couple of exhibits I could offer about that one. But anyway,
hey, look, if I was there for Buckaroo Banzai, then at least we're on the same wavelength.
Right. I knew Mike would enjoy it for sure. Well, I had this opportunity of always bringing home the highbrow stuff, way back years and years ago, and enjoy somewhat the same thing. And so then when the group sent us out together to pick up a movie, they figured we were going to come back with, something really cerebral. And we got to the Blockbuster and we were wandering through, and they were playing the trailer for Zoolander. And I was like, in spite of myself, I kind of want to see that one. She says, me too. And so Joy and I came back to the party with Zoolander and ruined our reputations. Anyway.
But speaking of not knowing what this was about, I'm going to say the description that Amazon gives the movie and then what we actually saw are very different things.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing out of the gate to know is that it is a Coen Brothers movie. If that name doesn't ring a bell, we're talking about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Fargo, The Big Lebowski, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So it's going to be weird. They're very postmodern, absurdist writers. And this was one of their early ones. This was the year before Fargo. Their first largish budget film.
Which, if you calculate in the marketing, they probably lost all of.
Yes, it did not do well in the box office. It picked up an awful lot afterward on VHS. But
I mean, let's be fair, because this movie came out the same weekend as Pulp Fiction. This movie has a very unconventional storytelling method, and so did Pulp Fiction. If you're going to go with unconventional story, it is no mystery as to why this got kind of swallowed up.
Whoa. Yeah. I'm just having an image in my head right now of what happened if the directors of these two movies got switched.
Nope. Quentin
Tarantino's The Hudsucker Proxy.
Nope. Hitting the nope button.
This does stand out among Coen Brothers movies as being the only one that's PG. Everything else they've done has been at least PG-13. They lean pretty hard on the R sometimes. And that probably didn't help it either, because you see it's not right necessarily that people will see PG and think that it's, for kids. But it does tend to happen. So yeah, and even though, nobody ever saw it, you've seen its sets. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but the skyscrapers make their appearance in several other movies. And of course, this was the one that started launching the Coen brothers up. And so we started getting their movies. And so it made a lot of contributions down the line, even though the movie itself, nobody actually saw it. And I picked it just because nobody's seen it and I like it.
I hadn't seen it before, and I really feel like I've been missing out. I mean, it has just the right blend of snappy writing and absurdist humor that is just right up my alley.
Yeah, and it occupies this very specific niche. I mean, I haven't made a point to watch a lot of all of the Coen Brothers filmography, but I've enjoyed what I've seen. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was just hilarious, entertaining. The Lady Killers was funny. And so, this fits right in there, except it does have that lower rating. So it's more accessible to the people who are listening to this show. I don't know that I wouldn't recommend everybody go out and watch Fargo because it's gruesome.
Yeah, the chipper scene was a little rough.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, I've not thought about that film since we watched it. Like my wife and I rented that one. Like, oh, we've heard this is brilliant. Gross.
Yes.
But this film, as you said, by contrast, is so much lighter. It really is kind of a breath of fresh air in some respects, despite the fact that it has a grim beginning.
Yeah, it opens with a suicide.
Or at least it alludes.
But it gets better.
Yeah. Maybe 1.5 suicides. The thing that I went and looked for a review of this film, and I just want to pull a quote from Roger Ebert. Not even the slightest attempt is made to suggest that this film takes its own story seriously. Everything is style. The performances seem deliberately angled as satire. And what's funny is that he wrote that as a bad thing, and I 100% agree, but I would say that's a merit, even though he didn't see it that way.
Yeah, I do wonder if he might have changed his tune if the sequence of films coming out, if he'd seen The Big Lebowski first and then this one, maybe he would have gotten where the directors were coming from a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But of course, that wasn't the sequence in which they were released, and he sees them in the theater as they come out. So, but yeah, I agree that the stylization of it is a pro, not a con. Should we talk about the film craft?
I mean, we better.
Tell us about those sets, Brian.
Yeah. So the company that was hired to do these buildings, I can't remember the name of the company. It's Mark Stetson is the guy that was in charge. And they built all of these gigantic buildings. I think in the featurettes for the Fifth Element, they call them bigatures. It's the same company that did Fifth Element and this movie. Because these buildings, they call them miniatures, but they're 6 to 8 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so big, in fact, that they couldn't even stand them up on the sets. A lot of those shots, half the buildings are on stilts on the floor, and the others are hung from the ceiling above them, so they're all sideways. So that's how they can get those great shots from like directly overhead. The camera is just in its normal place, and everything just turns sideways.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, there's some really great pictures, behind the scenes shots of that too.
Are things like that done anymore at all, Brian? Because the last time I was thinking that I saw a movie which made use of the bigatures, making these gigantic small sets, was in the behind the scenes videos for the Lord of the Rings movies.
I was thinking the same thing.
And I'm just wondering, because of how far digital effects have come, is this craft even used anymore?
It's not as common as it was. It still happens sometimes. I know Chris Nolan prefers to get things, in camera as much as he can, which is not to say that he doesn't use visual effects. I think people say, "Oh, Christopher Nolan doesn't use visual effects." Well, no, he just uses them. He uses them better, honestly. There were 300 visual effects shots in The Dark Knight. There were 300 visual effects shots in the last episode of Teen Wolf, a TV show. So he's using less, but that doesn't mean he doesn't use them. But since he likes to capture things in camera, he's more likely to use miniature sets than a lot of directors. So it's not entirely gone,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot less common than it used to be.
If you had to work with a shot, would you rather work with a bigature, or would you rather work with a completely all digital environment?
It depends on who built the bigature, honestly.
Fair.
If the
And Mike broke the
craftsmanship
show.
is good, then absolutely I would rather have that in camera, just because from
Actually,
the visual effects companies, from a visual effects artist perspective, I like to have a lot more in camera because I'm a tracking and layout person. So if I don't have like nice lines to get the focal length right and the camera good, my job is a lot harder when everything is just a big screen. So I think what's really good is if you put the miniatures at the level where they're going to be the most persuasive, and you can put CG in front of them, you can put CG behind them, depending on how good they look. But it's pretty common a lot to see these big city scenes. Like there's a really great video about the big fight scene from Hawkeye with the Christmas tree and that owl and the skating rink, and that entire cityscape is CG. It's amazing. So yeah, you see that a lot more often than you see the bigatures anymore. And I've lost the train of thought. Oh, so these buildings, they were built for like $2 million for Hudsucker Proxy. And the stage, their typical procedure was, when we're done with the set, we toss it in a big pit out back, set it on fire. And like, well, we just spent $2 million building all of these things, and they are gorgeous. They said, why don't you sell them instead?
I was like, wait. We want to film a remake of Towering Inferno. So go ahead and put them out there, then light it.
Well, sometimes that happens. What was it? Was it the burning of Terra for Gone with the Wind? Was originally the set from the Ten Commandments?
Huh.
So let's get out that old set and set it on fire, and we'll get our. I think that was the movies they did that for.
Get our money's worth.
Yeah. But they sold these sets to Universal to make The Shadow. And then Hudsucker Proxy was a Warner Brothers production. And so when they wanted to do Batman, they had to rent the same buildings that they had just sold to Universal to make Batman. So these are the same buildings that you'll see in Joel Schumacher's Batman films.
After that was when they lit them on fire, because they had been in Batman and Robin and Batman Forever.
No. Then they went to Godzilla and Independence Day.
Yeah, they should have burned them before they went to Godzilla.
They were supposed to be in The Fifth Element, but Godzilla had them at that time. They were shooting at the same time.
It's funny because when I saw that first shot, I thought, oh my gosh, part of this feels like, I know it's supposed to be New York, but it feels like Gotham. And I guess I'm not the only person who thought that.
You look at them and you kind of hear those Batman horns in the background.
Uh-huh. And it's funny because I didn't realize it was him at the time, but I actually worked with Mark Stetson, the guy that built the things.
Oh, very cool.
Was in charge of building the things. Yeah, he was the visual effects supervisor for The Gray at Zoic, which was the first feature that I worked on.
That is so cool.
Another name that we've talked about in the past is Roger Deakins, who we had misattributed the consulting cinematographer for How to Train Your Dragon. Or was it How to Train Your Dragon 2? I forget. Anyway, Roger Deakins was that consulting cinematographer on that, and he was the one who shot this one. And his experience and skill really shines through in the use of light. And there's a lot of unconventional, just kind of unsettling camera angles that are still very, very well done, like Dutch angled, low angle stuff.
I mean, there were a lot of things that were just absolutely fantastic. Like as messages were going through, and you're following all these various vacuum tubes to deliver messages, which is so funny. That was a thing before email.
Oh, I found the whole mailroom scene delightful.
Oh, man. And when they're delivering that message, how the camera is just following this straight onto the recipient. I mean, they had some really good shots in this film.
And that single point perspective, you've got everything like centered and all of these lines converging in the middle of the screen, especially like the boardroom. It reminds me of Wes Anderson.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that was the Coen brothers' decision, if that was directorial, or if that was Deakins, but it's really nice. And it kind of represents the corporate. Anytime you've got stuff that's about the Hudsucker company, is these centered shots, people right in the middle of the screen and lines converging on them to give it the sense of rigidity and stability. All of the stuff that's about Barnes, the main character, Norville Barnes.
Yes.
All the stuff that's about his slightly off kilter personality is where you're going to get those Dutch angles and those low angle shots that are just kind of weird.
I mean, unconventional, little weird is the way to shoot this character.
Yes. I've been talking a lot. Did anybody else have anything on Filmcraft before I talk about music?
I mean, you kind of hit the high points of some of the things that I thought were really fantastic. The bigatures, the use of just panning over the skyscraper, these long shots trailing down the edge of the office building as people are possibly falling to their deaths in a very PG fashion. It just goes on and on forever. And it's supposed to only be like 52 floors. I mean, that can't be much more than the Nakatomi building.
53, however, including the mezzanine.
I mean, and it was like, if somebody had done the math and said, if this was with the amount of length that they had put in at this perspective using this 6:1 scale model, it would actually have been a 90-story building. Like, nobody cares. It was just a cool shot. But I'll say this, I don't have this in the notes, but just the writing is, especially since 51 with the mezzanine, there are so many callbacks during this script. Like, they'll establish a joke once or twice, and then it'll let you breathe for a second. And then sometimes without even a lot of sense, like, well, we're looking for somebody who's 41 years old. 51 counting the mezzanine. Like, wait, what? Or like, we've only got 39 days left. 51 counting the mezzanine. Like, it's some of it felt Monty Python-ish, but not.
4 weeks, 30 days, a month at the outside.
What felt kind of Python-esque to me was when the character of Noville was sitting in the diner, and in walks Amy, and the two blue-collar workmen are on the other side of the restaurant looking at them and narrating what was going on. Do what?
The cabbies.
Yes, the cabbies. Yeah. They're narrating what's going on between these two. In walks the dame, looking for this. Her life's been hard, but she's got one more chance. It was fascinating to listen to. I'm like, I want to watch a movie where these two guys narrate the entire thing.
Like, they have seen every con out there, and so they're narrating them as the con is happening. And it's beautiful. It was just beautiful. Yeah, so that's not so much Filmcraft, but it is. I mean, the writing was just way too darn snappy.
It was, and I was also surprised at how fast-paced the movie was. I mean, they don't really leave you sitting thinking about anything for too long. It clocked in at just under 2 hours, but it went by at a very fast pace.
Yeah, this was a trilogy in 2 hours.
Those montages that covered, I think there were like 3 big montage scenes in the movie that just kind of tell the story really fast and take you forward without having to actually cover that information. Helped keep the pace up.
Mm-hmm. I just about lost it when they were doing the R&D building the hula hoops, and you see people behind plexiglass sandbags. I'm like, what are? And then you see these guys in like combat suits jumping behind the sandbags. I'm like, what is? And the hula hoops around a dummy that's got dynamite strapped around it.
I'm not entirely certain what they were hoping to see there.
But the fact that the hula hoop and like 1 foot of the dummy is all that survives. I think I had to pause it for a few because I just lost it.
And they were marking time by a secretary reading Tolstoy novels.
Yes.
So like,
War and Peace, Anna Karenina.
It was just a smart montage. It really was.
And those 2 silhouettes, the guys that are ad execs, that was Sam Raimi was one of them, and then his longtime collaborator, what was his name, John Cameron.
Okay.
I looked up their bio. Actually, they and Bruce Campbell were all in high school together.
Well, that explains why Bruce Campbell was in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Smitty.
The other reporter.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't recognize him with the chainsaw in his hand, right?
I mean,
I did look at Joy. Why is Bruce Campbell in this movie?
Because Sam Raimi wrote it. And he works in a lot of Coen Brothers films also. He shows up in a few of them. I don't know who the third guy was. I looked, but I didn't see him in the credits. But the music is something I wanted to talk about because I honestly can't tell where the movie's score ends and a classical piece begins. Because they used Kakaturian in the hula hoop montage, the saber dance, and I think the montage, the laughing montage when they're giving Norville his haircut and making him the president, I believe that was it's the same bit from Pomp and Circumstance.
oh yeah.
I think that was Elgar there, but you can't tell, where did it transition from the movie score to the classical piece. I thought that was really nice and very, very well done. And they used actual music from the film reel was the music they actually used for film reels in the 50s in Britain.
Huh.
Excellent choices because it fit the movie like a glove.
Perfectly. So let's talk a little bit about plot and theme.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I know a lot of people won't have seen this one even before they listen to the show. So I'm going to just summarize it real quick. The basis of it is we've got this company, the Hudsucker Industries, and they're, high on the hog. Everything is going great. And their CEO, their president and founder, inexplicably dives out the window of the 45th floor or whatever it was. And they realize he hasn't declared an heir. He doesn't have a will. And by the company bylaws, all of his stock, 87% of the company, is going to be sold on the open market. And the board is concerned, hey, we're going to lose control of the company. But we can't afford to buy his stock. It's too expensive because we've been doing so well. So they decide they want to depress the price of the stock. And they're going to do this by getting some schmo, an idiot, as the new president, and let him make all the bad decisions, say all the wrong things, and let the stocks plummet to the point where they can buy it back. So they get Tim Robbins from Mailroom, Norville Barnes, and he is your optimistic, plucky,
fresh from small town America.
He's got a real Frank Capra, Jimmy Stewart vibe to him, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington kind of thing. And so they install him as the president, and instead of making bad decisions and tanking the company, he invents the hula hoop. And they make more money than they've ever made. And the chairman of the board has made the foolish decision of selling all of the board members' stock in the middle of this to try and drive the price down even further. So they find out they sold all their stock and now it's worth more than it ever has been. And so they've got to tear Barnes down from this pinnacle that he's on. And that's the basic plot of the movie. I won't go any further into it than that because if you're interested, you should watch it. And I don't want to give away the ending.
Yeah, him succeeding with the hula hoop is, much to my bewilderment, not the end of the movie.
Right.
I did enjoy the other montage where you see everyone from kids to parents to high society members, even wedding parties, all hula hooping.
There's one shot where they were vacuuming doing the hula hoop that I'm like, that has to be a forced perspective shot. There is no way she is holding that vacuum and hula hooping. Yeah, I would say that this film is a good example of unconventional storytelling. There were a couple of times that I really couldn't tell what kind of film I was watching. So I wasn't really sure where I was in the progression of the plot. There was only twice that I found that disorienting rather than intriguing. But most of the time it was me looking at my friend as she was watching it with me. Like, I have no idea where this film is going.
What were those two moments?
One, I think, was right after the brilliant success of the hula hoop, and we had so much like this feels kind of like a triumphal ending, but what time is it? Like, so I broke myself from the experience of the film and paused the film to see where we were. And we're like, we've got a lot of film left. And the other was right at the climax of the film, spoilers for like a 1994 film, which I'm not actually going to spoil. And we were doing a long pan down the building. Like, I see no way out of this predicament. I don't know where they're not going to do what they're setting up they're going to do. So I don't know what I don't know where this film is going.
Yeah, and then you're in the middle of like they're not doing this. What in the Yeah, that was definitely understandable. I think part of the disjoint comes that it seems to have two places where it breaks into the second act.
Yeah.
Because you've got Norval Barnes's plot, and that, hey, I'm pitching my idea for the hula hoop, and that's his second entry to the second act. But Amy Archer has her own when she goes into the clock space.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where suddenly she's in this like almost an underworld of her own. And since those aren't happening like right next to each other, the film kind of gets out of sync with itself.
What is interesting is it gets out of sync with itself while surrounded by clockwork.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say that wasn't a great scene, because that was a great setting while she is finally seeing the inner machinations of the Hudsucker corporation. So she peeps through that keyhole and sees the real people who are, quote unquote, actually running the show. And she's seeing these inner workings while she is surrounded by the inner workings of a clock. And she is illuminated, but still, due to her own resistance to the truth, still befuddled, when Moses reveals to her, not, the Ten Commandments Moses, but a dude named Moses. Not to say that the guy who had the Ten Commandments wasn't a dude. We'll unpack that later. Okay. And he's saying, yeah, you've still got this all wrong. I'm seeing everything that's happening, and you're still blinded by your own preconceptions. And, just like, oh, what do you know anyway? And just kind of saunters off.
When we meet the character of Moses, we think like, oh, he's just a guy who's been behind the scenes so long, he's seen so much, and he's got that perspective where he knows more than anyone else. Because he's never been noticed. But then when we get that scene at the end of the movie, once again, try not to spoil things, but basically...
He stops time by shoving a broom into
that, and the fact that he not just casually, he brutally breaks the fourth wall. I mean, he doesn't just break, he throws a brick through the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And I found that scene... I could literally hear the screech of the tires and the smelling of burnt rubber in my brain when that happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. What has this movie turned into?
Well, that comes really out of left field, doesn't it?
It hurt. And I mean, we're speaking about unique storytelling, and it's definitely distinctive how they enact that change that turns around the movie for the main characters. I mean, there's uses of Deus Ex Machina. I don't even know what the term is for what they did here. I mean... Deus Ex Clockina. Because face it, the two elements that enforce the biggest change, storytelling-wise and character-wise, both take place inside the clock tower.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I watched it the second time, I was paying more attention to the door painter. And he gets his own musical cue when he's first introduced that lets you know that this guy's more important than he seems. But because it's just a musical cue and some eye contact, and it's at the very beginning, it goes by before you even know what you're in for in the movie. It's not apparent until you watch it the second time. It's like, oh yeah, they actually did make kind of a deal out of this character right there. And then they ignored him for the rest of the film until you get to the end.
I don't believe that he actually is any type of supernatural force, as they allude for him to be at the end. I just think he's sick and tired of having to repaint names on the doors. And he's like, nope, I'm done with it. I'm tired of being interrupted at it. I'm stopping this now.
I mean, I wonder if it's just kind of the idea that there are make or break people in these entities that are easily overlooked at the first glance, but their presence or absence makes the difference as to whether or not the wheels can keep turning.
Mm-hmm.
And that we just happen to have one that is kind of representative of the falling axe, and the other that is representative of greasing the gears and fine tuning everything so it can continue to operate.
Interesting.
I don't know. That was just my read on it.
No, that's good stuff. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that you've got these people that exist in every organization. We were talking about Avasarala in The Expanse as one of these at the beginning, because she's not an elected person. People don't know who she is outside of the actual inner circle of the political spheres, and yet she's driving everything. And these guys are representative of that too. That they're not making the big bucks. They don't have the titles. They've got their own agendas, and they're doing things to affect the company. It's interesting.
Yeah, I've been put in a position where I've had the order come down the pipe to make sure you give so-and-so a good telling off, because I made a mistake and I'm unwilling to admit that I'm the one who made the mistake. So you go and tell them what to. And I will just say, I will make sure that I take all appropriate action with that, sir. And then promptly hang up the phone.
We were mentioning the fact that this is a movie a movie about the 50s made in the 90s. And there's this tendency, Americans tend to look back at the 50s as this golden era. American power on the rise, a lot of optimism.
We're post-World War II. There's a sense of new purpose, rebuilding. I actually made that comment to Joy about how I wondered what it would have been like to be in the 50s at that time.
You mean before we passed some of those labor laws? Oh, I guess we'll find out as we're repealing them. Never mind. Soldier on, gentlemen.
Well, I meant to be like, how great would it be that instead of school, I was sending all of my 3 children to work? I mean, how wonderful would that be?
Yeah, and we know it had its issues. This movie kind of channels that reputation, though, and deconstructs it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you've got the tension between the ideal of the self-made man in wearing Hudsucker, 50 years building his empire, and you contrast that with Norville Barnes, who is a very Gen X kind of guy. He takes a shortcut. He gets a lucky break. He's at the top of the company without having to earn it. This is the reputation that Gen Xers have, particularly among the boomers. And the opening narration calls attention to that. Talking about one moment right now. This is it. And that's in contrast to, well, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and put in the work for 50 years. And so I enjoyed that, looking at the 50s through that lens of the 80s, pretty much.
It's interesting, the 2 classes of people who we see that have, like you said, put in the work. You either got the bosses at the top, who only care for profit and care nothing for the little people below them, or B, the guy who has been working in the mailroom for 40-something years and is hoping one day to be promoted to parcels.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and just the brutality of the orientation. I mean, this guy is getting information screamed at him. Like this is your employee code, 15798352431. It will not be repeated. If you do not enter your company code on the bullet, you will be fired. Like, okay, well, it was nice knowing you.
Mm-hmm. Something that we wondered was, at the very beginning of the movie, we see Norville. He gets off the bus, and he's looking at the switcher plates for the employment company.
Oh,
was that an actual thing? Did they do that, or was that created purely for this movie?
I don't
know. That'll be something to research, I guess.
Do we know anybody who was looking for jobs in New York in the 1950s?
I'm sure there's an encyclopedia entry about it somewhere.
I just have to find an encyclopedia. Thanks, Brian.
I'm sure if we look online, we could find a commercial for the Encyclopedia Britannica, but that's about it.
If this was the 50s, you could find a salesman to sell one to you. Some of those job titles were humorous also.
Like cat meat
I don't know what a
salesman.
cat meets man is.
Yeah,
Yes.
cat meatsman.
I'm not sure if they would really have put exotic dancer up on the job board.
Okay, so I didn't imagine that. I was wondering.
Yeah, it was there.
Experience needed for all of them.
Right, rope braider. And would they have really been advertising for company vice president on the job board out on the sidewalk?
Hmm.
And did you read the fine print on the Hudsucker job listing?
I tried.
High hours, little pay.
Yeah, low wages, long hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You couldn't read anything else on that job ad, but they made sure that you could see that.
Yeah.
I do love the fact that instead of circling the want ad, it was a coffee stain on the newspaper that circled the want ad. I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, that whole shot was great
Mhm.
because of the repeating circles. I really liked it. So you had the coffee cup, and you had the change on the thing, and then you had a couple of plates and all of these like salt shakers. Just circles, and then pick up the cup, and there's another circle.
I mean, this is a circle.
And he keeps on showing his circle to everyone,
Right.
for the kids.
for kids.
Right. We didn't mention that his schematic for the hula hoop that he keeps showing people without any context.
And it's the same look on everyone's face. They look at the circle and then up at him, and the expression doesn't change.
Like, what a zero.
I like that everything that gets made, whether it's the hula hoop, the straw, or the frisbee at the end, on the R&D blueprints, it's the last word in the description is always dingus. It's a small minor point, but it made me laugh. Well, shall we talk about the characters themselves?
Yes, we shall.
Mr. Norville Barnes
Oh my gosh.
from Muncie, Indiana, because that only gets mentioned like 24 times.
And I grew up not far. I mean, I grew up in Illinois, but I grew up not terribly far. I have friends from Muncie. But anyway, so
How unfortunate for you.
So did you know the song already?
It worked.
You're good.
I am
Go Eagles!
I am definitely going to ask them. I am not going to ask them. Although, wait a minute, Brooksy was homeschooled, so she never would have sung the song anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, moving on. Norville, I love the fact that this character is just a pendulum that swings between simple brilliance and abject lack of any sense at all whatsoever. Like, he's got a great idea. I mean, and it is just a great idea. And he'll have these moments of insight, and then he'll step from that moment of insight into bungling the worst social blunder he could possibly manage. And it's not quite cringy and painful, but you can watch that the characters around him are looking at it like it's cringy and painful, and it's delightful.
It's all because he has no experience. If he had been in the corporate world for 5 years, then he would know how to maneuver, how to speak to people. But he is brand new in town from Muncie, and he's should have worked his way up, but instead he went from mailroom to president.
Yeah. I mean, he's smart. I mean, we learned that about him at the beginning, along with Paul Newman, that he made the dean's list. He graduated in business school. He's an intelligent person, but his naivety is shown throughout this entire movie. I mean, it almost seems like he never quite, for most of it, gets off that bus stop in front of the employment office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm also thinking of some of his interactions with Amy Archer. Like, he's sitting there talking to this woman and then speculating as to what sort of woman would think ill of him at a first meeting. Now, granted, he does not know that she's actually an undercover reporter who's writing this press about him, but you would think that something would kick in of, I should not speculate as to what a woman looks like and acts like and seems like and has a social life like that I've not even met, to any other person at all whatsoever, particularly and especially this young lady who may or may not have my attention.
In his defense, though, it's a very guy thing.
It's a very 50s thing, too.
Yeah, he does well at first, but sticks his foot in it at the end.
The bit about the musical. Let's go see The King and I. And she slaps him.
Okay, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma?
I loved that. Clearly, that was the problem.
And
yeah, it's exactly that sort of thing that makes you say that he has no common sense, not just in the business world, but in his interactions with Amy.
Yep. And I'll always be a Tim Robbins fan. I've enjoyed him in so many things. What I liked is, once again, we get a montage where he's changed from, the Muncie, Indiana boy to try to be made up to look like a corporate businessman. And everything from the haircut, the shave, the clothes. And do you notice that towards the end of that, he's even changed how he talks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he starts to buy into the image that they're crafting for him.
Mm-hmm.
He's turning himself into a little Musburger.
Exactly. Because that's who his role model is.
And it is once he gets a little Musburger, like he takes it as far as he can, but that's also in the wrong direction. He doesn't have the wisdom to understand how to navigate that socially. And I think that's interesting. And it winds up destroying him, nearly anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The end of his arc, I find a little abrupt. He gets to the end, and I don't feel like he earned his victory. The Deus Ex Machina there was deliberate, and
it literally took time being stopped and an act of God for his path to be changed.
Yeah, I'm sure that's deliberate. I mean, the Coen brothers are definitely postmodernists, and they wanted to look at that, and it wasn't an unconscious choice that he's not earning his victory, but it still felt very hollow to me while I was thinking about his character particularly.
I mean, he got lucky twice. And this being a story about corporate America, I think that tracks.
Yeah, especially with that Gen X overlay on a story about the 50s.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we're supposed to believe that he became a successful businessman. We're supposed to believe that he got lucky through no merits of his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I am not going to say that these multi-billion-dollar companies are headed by people who were in the right place at the right time with the right assets that were put behind them and are there because of luck and not skill. But I'm just going to end this sentence. No, I mean, in earnest, the few people that we would culturally say are the pinnacle of success, you ask Bill Gates, why are you in the position that you're in? He will say, I got lucky. Mm-hmm. I was in the right place at the right time, and things should have gone the other way, but they didn't, and I was there. And he pointed to at least 2 different instances where that was the case, and everything could have hinged there, and it was just the roll of the dice.
The roll of the dice,
the only one.
And a very loving, encouraging, supportive check from parents for $600,000.
That never. I mean, I don't know from experience, but I hear that never hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not never hurts. I've also seen other celebrities that wind up in the papers, but we're not going to talk about them either.
But speaking of the papers, and also of dubious accents at weird places. Let's move on to the character of Amy Archer.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, in a typical corporate America movie, she'd be like just the love interest, or she might even be the antagonist. If this was a love story, the fact that she lied to him to become his secretary, to get the investigative scoop, would be the second act. That would be the get them together, get them apart, get them back together.
Mm-hmm.
But this was just kind of a side note in her arc. And I think it's funny because she winds up being a more interesting character than the protagonist.
I agree. The only thing I didn't like was how they approached the romance between them. Did we expect it to happen? Yeah. I just don't think that they planned it out very well. I didn't find it believable, the reasons why she fell in love with him.
Quite frankly, I don't find the reasons why my wife fell in love with me very believable, but I am not going to second guess them. I'm sorry, I derailed that one.
No, that's good.
I'm going to have to ask Kaja about the Fraley proxy.
No, you're thinking, wow, why does Joy love me? Man, I really should just buy some more flowers so she doesn't start asking herself the same questions.
Oh, no, I know why she loves me. Look at me. I'm delightful.
I mean, we know that. We established that in our Lost episode.
I don't know. At one point, I looked at her, and maybe it was just the accent that just kind of, it was fun. It was here, it was there, it was doing its own thing. And I looked at Joy and said, will you tell me what she does? Because right now I can't even.
Yeah, her accent was kind of a character all its own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, her accent change depended on what she was doing. If she was being the reporter, she was keeping up with the office with that old-timey mid-Atlantic, kind of that broadcaster type accent where they all talk very fast. And that was her presentation in the professional world. When she was going undercover, she was doing a softer voice to try to be a more timid character. When she was being Amy Archer, she had a different presentation, and you don't very often get to see Amy Archer when she figures out who Amy Archer is.
Well, she was obviously having a hard time keeping them straight. Her whole monologue while Norval is carrying her in, she keeps losing her place.
Yeah.
And having to, okay, wait. Oh yeah, and then
well, in that place it's understandable because she's trying to figure out exactly who she needs to be in order to get close to him.
Well, yeah, that's her entire character. She's trying to figure out who she needs to be the reporter. She's trying to figure out who she needs to be to buddy up to Norval. She's trying to figure out, she's never honest enough with herself to know who she is. And I think that's what that scene in the clock tower is all about, because Moses is challenging her. You don't even know who you are. How can you know anything about Norval? And, she lies to him. She's lying to herself. But that's where she makes that moment of transition where she's realizing this persona that I've invented, with all the voices that go along with it, are not suiting me. They're not meeting the needs that I have. And I think the reason that she's the more interesting character of the two is because she is the one that changes. She's the only dynamic character in the movie. Norval is the same at the beginning as he is at the end. Musburger obviously doesn't change other than being committed at the end. But she learns to give up that persona that she's constructed to be a more genuine and more honest person. And it's not comfortable for her. She still falls into her browbeating when she gives Norval her diatribe, because that's the way that she can express herself and be strong enough to do that. As soon as she starts thinking of herself as not one of the guys, in air quotes, she's a lot less confident in herself. She's kind of lost. And that's why she wasn't able to talk to him in the bar, because she wasn't comfortable enough with herself. She didn't have the words to say to him because she doesn't operate in that mode often enough.
I would have liked to have seen more backstory in her character.
Me too.
Did we ever find out, obviously she's pretending to be from Muncie, but do they ever say, where she's from, what her history is in the movie? Did I miss that, or did they never delve into it?
She's been in New York for several years. We know that much, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
She's won a Pulitzer.
She's won a Pulitzer, I was about to say.
And she doesn't know the difference between a new and an emu. The third major character we've got there is Sidney Musburger, the corporate man. We get a really good idea of we know who he is from the get-go. This guy that he's known for, they've probably been friends, co-workers for 50 years. He's probably been with Hudsucker from the beginning. Hudsucker's just jumped out the window, and Sid's more concerned about the waste of a cigar.
Yeah.
He looks at people as, what use are they to me? What use are they to the company? The president's a cog in the machine. We just need to replace him. So used to being in charge, so used to everyone obeying him, that when he says stop, even gravity does.
I loved that. The little swinging balls, the clack, 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 clack. And he says stop, and they just stop.
Well, because they know if they don't, then they'll get docked and fired.
Right.
If you don't stop, they dock you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got just a sliver of the clock in his office. I
Yeah.
thought that was really cool. That's a great set.
Mm-hmm. Played to the hilt by Paul Newman.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mike's not going to make his joke.
I was thinking about making the joke. And they did a great job on his makeup because, I mean, gosh, he hardly recognized that it was the same guy from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But
Was Paul Newman in Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
no, Paul Rubin was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
That was the same reaction I had when he said,
See, you know it was bad. Like I had said it.
and I'm like,
I'd
going to IMDb, was Paul Newman associated with Pee Wee Herman?
no, I had
You
made
have
some.
really lost me here.
Yeah, I had made some offhand stupid joke to Brian before we started recording. And it was only because he poked me that I decided to make it on recording. And I never, ever, ever should have in the first place, on or off recording. It was a mistake, and I apologize to the internet. I kind of feel like we've already talked about Moses and the Door Painter.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we
Which
need
I
to
guess
revisit them.
brings us to the end of the movie. I mean, do we have anything else to say?
Not that I can think of.
It's 2 hours of just good, well-written fun. It's a goofy, unconventional movie. If you haven't already, just watch it. If you like Oh Brother Where Art Thou, if you like Buster Scruggs, just take 2 hours of your time and take a look at this.
And on that note, let's head to the zombie apocalypse strategy of the week. Mike, does the plan to stay alive from the undead involve circles?
Oh, yeah, absolutely it does. Because if you're being attacked by zombies and time is running out, obviously you just shove a broomstick into a clock, and apparently time is on your side at that point, and it's all cleaned up from there. Yeah, I don't know how it worked. I don't know how. But, I mean, look, you're being chased by zombies. You may as well try to stop time by shoving a broomstick in a clock. What have you got to lose?
A foot?
A lot. But,
Yeah, a lot, really. But...
and on that note, that will wrap it up for us this episode. Thank you all for listening in. Make sure you check us out online at geekatarms.com, at facebook.com/geekatarms. And Mike, what's our Twitter?
We are Arms Geek on Twitter.
Give us a like, leave us a review if you would. It really helps the podcast. And as always, from Brian, Mike, and James, be safe, be blessed, and be geeky.
Thanks for listening to Geek at Arms. Music for this podcast was provided by Incompetech.com. For more, check us out at Facebook.com/Geek at Arms. Give us a like and maybe even subscribe to us on iTunes. That would be awesome.